Hello, my name is Zachary Abbott, and this is my Module 5 PowerPoint assignment. Alrighty, when we look at the first procedure here, we're looking at conducting pretrial release evaluations. And I'm pretty much doing every slide the same here and trying to keep it pretty direct. But essentially, in summary, it's setting conditions for offenders before they're released from jail. So if there's higher risks, say it was a very violent domestic situation, they might do higher monitoring for a certain individual, maybe based on their history. This is nice because you can kind of cater to the offender and to the crime that happened. And kind of like I said before, it takes into consideration, has this happened before? If this is a number 2 or a 3-time deal, they might make it a little bit more severe for their pretrial release conditions. And I think the most important task here is protecting the victim. This doesn't necessarily seem like, you had a really bad domestic situation and we're going to punish you harder. It's more or less to protect that victim. Having a DANCO, the domestic do not contact order in place, is to protect the victim. So the second procedure here is supervising defendants on conditional release. In summary, it's implementing and enforcing the judge's decision to inform the victim of the conditions that the offender will be under. I know when I release people from jail, we're required to call the victims, at least attempt to get a hold of them, and we'll explain what the conditions that the individual is being released under, and if there's a DANCO in place, we'll tell them that there's a do not contact order in place. If you hear from them, feel free to call authorities. And this is also kind of the step where you're explaining to the offenders, hey, this is the certain conditions you need to follow set forth by the judge, X, Y, and Z that you need to be following. And this can include, drug testing, and also responding to violations of these conditions. I think the most important task is enforcing the judge's decisions and holding offenders accountable. If you think that you're going to get out of jail and you're going to start using drugs and think that probation is not going to keep an eye on you, I think you're wrong. So I think that is very important there. All right, third slide here, conducting pre-sentence investigations. So just summary of the tasks. Give the courts information on the offender. You're going to look at potential risks to the victim and to the public. How much of a risk, how much of a danger is this person to the victim, or maybe just the public in general? We're going to look at a history of violence that this offender has done, and write recommendations for sentencing and probation conditions. So this is a really important step here, as it can give the courts a lot more information. And I think the most important task here is to provide the courts with the necessary information for sentencing and probation conditions, kind of like we said on the first slide. If this person has a habitual violent person, this investigation could be vital to maybe putting this person away for public safety. All right, next here we have victim engagement. In pre-sentence, summary of the tasks, communicate with the victim to help understand their domestic relationship that they're in. We can interview, and victims can have a say in what's happening with the offender as far as the legal process. They can help explain the severity of the situation. Communicating with the victim really helps build trust. Without their statements and without, I guess, their help, it's hard to hold offenders accountable and to help victims as well. And this is kind of the step where maybe this victim wants to make an impact statement of what they've gone through. And just the most important task, I think, is just to ensure that the victim can have an active role in providing information and assuming or making sure that justice is passed. Alrighty, next, supervising domestic violence offenders on probation. Summary of the tasks. Probation officers will meet with offenders to review and discuss all the conditions. There shouldn't be any questions on the offender's end of what they can and cannot do if they really care about their probation and staying out of prison or jail. It's ensuring that they understand all their conditions and that we are continuing to monitor them while they're on probation, and that we don't just give them these conditions and send them off, and that we're actually responding to the violations. And the most important task I kind of saw here was conducting routine monitoring of offenders and conducting field work. So maybe it's showing up to their job and giving them a drug test. If ordered by the courts that they cannot use alcohol or drugs, and that would be obvious violation. And holding them accountable to these conditions is really key here. All right. Probation violations and revocation of probation. Just a summary of these tasks here. To investigate possible probation violations. Kind of touched on that a little bit. And responding to these violations, are there any non-incarcerated options we can take here? Or maybe the probation officer needs to put an order to detain and this person just needs to be taken into custody again. They've kind of proven they can't stay and follow their probation rules. So, and also the next step here would be consider all the factors when responding to violations. Like overall community safety, maybe giving this person a second or a third chance. Are we really putting that victim at risk here? Has this person in the past shown that they listen while they're on probation? Is this their first time, second time, third time? So this is kind of very important. And then I think the most important task here is to have a really appropriate response to the probation violations. If we're talking very, very minute violation, is it too extreme to just throw the person back into jail for something very tiny? Or is this a big enough mistake where, this person probably should see their original jail time for this? All right, next slide here, summary and task. Review the PSI reports and provide feedback for guidance. Conduct regular reviews of probation response and enforcement of conditions. Compliance to policies and protocols is just making sure that our probation system is up to date and that our probation is doing what it's set out to do. And I think the most important task here is to keep that probation program up to date, and that we're having effective programs that are actually holding offenders accountable, all while bringing resources to victims as well. And I think the most challenging part, I was kind of looking over and it was kind of hard for me to decide, but I kind of went with probation violations. Decisions need to be made and take into consideration all aspects of the case when offenders violate their probation. Can the offender learn with other means than being incarcerated? I don't know if this would be maybe like a forced treatment, a drug treatment or something, if there is drugs involved. Are they really taking probation seriously? If they're not, maybe jail is a better place, or a solution for them. Violations such as dank orders are very serious, and I know in Minnesota, from a lot of ones I see, are a felony offense, and really show a lack of care to follow these court orders, and it's really to hard for offenders to be accountable when they don't care about their probation. Are they just going to continue to offend? So that's kind of up to the offender there. And here's my reference. Thank you.